The mysterious Tibetan. Quote, St. Petersburg in 1905 was probably the mystical center of the world. End quote. Colin Wilson, The Occult. Shamsaran Pyotr Badmaev was a Buryat Mongol who had grown up in Siberia and converted to Russian Orthodoxy, with Alexander III acting as his godfather. He gained considerable influence at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the Tsar granted him the title of Privy Councillor. Badmaev was renowned as a doctor of Tibetan medicine, herbalist, and healer who treated high society patients at his fashionable Oriental Medicine Clinic in St. Petersburg. Described by a Russian historian as, quote, one of the most mysterious personalities of the day and a master of intrigue, end quote, Badmaev enjoyed a close association with the mystic healer Rasputin. Known as the Tibetan, Badmaev dreamed of the unification of Russia with Mongolia and Tibet. He involved himself in endless projects aimed at the creation of a great Eurasian empire. Russia's historical mission, he believed, lay in the east, where she was destined to unite the Buddhist and Muslim peoples as a counter to Western colonialism. Badmaev outlined his vision in an 1893 report to Tsar Alexander III entitled The Tasks of Russia in the Asiatic East. His considerable political expertise secured the support of the Mongol tribes in the Russo-Japanese War. In a letter of the 19th of December, 1896, Badmaev wrote to Tsar Nicholas II, My activities have the aim that Russia should have greater influence than other powers upon the Mongolian, Tibetan, Chinese East. Badmaev expressed particular concern over the influence of England in the East, stating in a special memorandum, quote, Tibet, which, as the highest plateau of Asia, rules over the Asiatic continent, must without doubt be in hands of Russia. By commanding this point, Russia will surely be able to make England more compliant. End quote. Badmaev knew of the legend, popular in Mongolia, China, and Tibet, about the White Tsar who would come from the north, from northern Shambhala, and restore the now decadent traditions of true Buddhism. He reported to Tsar Nicholas II how Buryats, Mongols, and especially Lamas were always repeating that the time had come to extend the frontiers of the White Tsar in the east. Badmaev had a close association with a highly placed Tibetan, the Lama Agvan Dorjiev, the tutor and confidant of the 13th Dalai Lama. Dorjiev equated Russia with the coming kingdom of Shambhala anticipated in the Kalachakra texts of Tibetan Buddhism. The Lama opened the first Buddhist temple in Europe in St. Petersburg, significantly dedicated to the Kalachakra teaching. One of the Russian artists who worked on the St. Petersburg temple was Nicholas Roerich, who had been introduced to the legend of Shambhala and Eastern thought by Lama Dorjiev. George Gurdjieff, another man of mystery who had a tremendous impact on Western esotericism, knew Prince Ukhtomsky, Badmaev, and Lama Dorjiev. Was Gurdjieff, accused by the British of being a Russian spy in Central Asia, a pupil of the mysterious Tibetans? Quote, I am training young men in two capitals, Peking and Petersburg, for further activities. End quote. Dr. Badmaev had written to Tsar Nicholas II. Mystical Anarchism. The sway of the Tibetan reached beyond the imperial courts into the Russian intelligentsia and further still to the subterranean world of espionage and revolutionary politics. One of the intellectual movements at the time of the 1905 political upheavals was called mystical anarchism. Two of its leading exponents were the poet and writer Vyacheslav Ivanov and George Chulkov, both associates of Dr. Badmaev. Chulkov, like the Tibetan, is described as an unconscious medium transmitting mysterious forces. A radical political doctrine aimed at reconciling individual freedom and social harmony, mystical anarchism drew on the ideas of Friedrich Nietzsche. This is not surprising when we consider Nietzsche's positive view of Russia as the antithesis of the decadent West, and the German philosopher's appreciation of Buddhism and Oriental culture. According to the historian Bernice Glatzer-Rosenthal, mystical anarchists, convinced that unseen forces are guiding events here on Earth, believed that political revolution reflected realignments in the cosmic sphere, and that a new world of freedom, beauty, and love was imminent. Quote, advocating the abolition of all external authorities and all constraints on the individual, government, law, morality, social custom. They were indifferent to legal rights as mere formal freedoms, and opposed constitutions and parliaments in favor of sobernost. By sobernost, they meant a free community, united by love and faith, whose members retain their individuality, as distinct from individualism, self-affirmation apart from or against the community. They grounded this ideal in their notion of the mystical person, the soul or the psyche, which seeks union with others and recognizes itself as a microcosm of the macrocosm, as distinct from the empirical person, the I or the ego, which asserts itself apart from or against others. Evoking and developing this mystical person would make feasible a new organic society, united by invisible inner ties of love, eros, not agape, mystical experience, and sacrifice, the very opposite of liberal society, based on the social contract and mutual self-interest and characterized by rational discourse." End quote. Mystical anarchism is a thoroughly Eurasian socio-political idea. Here we have a most arcane motif in a modern form, the great struggle of the empirical, plutocratic Western civilization against the mystical, sacrificial center of Eurasia. In occult terms, it is the conflict of the impulse of Shambhala with the renegades of Atlantean civilization, the brotherhood of the Northern Light battling it out with the brothers of the Shadow, external manifestations of the long war between the agents of being and non-being. Nicholas Burdayev, Dmitry Merezhovsky, Zeneda Hippias, Valery Bryusov, Mikhail Kuzmin, Alexandra Blok, Vasily Rozanov, along with a host of other Russian poets, writers, and artists, transmitted different aspects of mystical anarchism and the Eurasian vision. When in the years before the revolution, the Sufi master Inayat Khan visited Russia, he found much to commend in the, quote, Eastern type of discipleship which is natural to the nation, end quote. Merezhovsky saw the possibility of evolving a new religious consciousness from the two peculiar Russian types represented by Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. Tolstoy stood for a pantheistic mysticism of the flesh, and Dostoevsky for the more ascetical, spiritual values. Quote, "In this Russia the man-god shall be manifested to the Western world, and the God-man for the first time to the Eastern, and shall be, for those whose thinking already reconciles both hemispheres, the one in two." End quote. After the Bolshevik Revolution, Bloch contrasted the new Russia with the West. He called Russia the Scythian, which means the young, fresh nation, whose destiny it was to challenge the decaying West. Quote, "We are the Scythians, we are the Asians. Centuries of your days are but an hour to us, yet like obedient slaves we've held a shield between two hostile races, Europe and the Mongol hordes. From war and horror come to our open arms the embrace of kin. Put the old sword away while there's time. Hail us, brothers. Ah, old world, before you have perished, join our fraternal banquet." End quote. The poet Nikolai Kliuev and his young friend Sergei Essenin featured occult images and Eurasian themes in their work. At the end of 1917, Kliuev, a prophet and emissary of Eurasia, wrote, quote, "We are the host of sun-bearers on the hub of the universe. We will erect 100-story fiery house. China and Europe, the North and the South, will come to the chamber in a round dance of playmates to match together abyss and zenith. Their godfather is God himself, and their mother is Russia." End quote. Kliuev's protege, Essenin, longed for the end of the old world and its replacement by a new one, and even proclaimed a new religious trend called Agolism, with clear roots in Russian Gnosticism. He hailed both Christ and Gautama the Buddha as geniuses because they were men of word and deed. In a letter to a friend, Essenin wrote, quote, "People, look at yourselves. Did not Christs emerge from you, and can you not be Christs? Can I, with willpower, not be a Christ? How absurd all our life is. It distorts us from the cradle, and instead of truly real people, some kind of monster emerges." End quote. He warned the United States, to him the symbol of all non-Russian and rationalist sources, not to commit the mistake of unbelief and ignore the new message from Russia, as the way to the new life is only through Russia. A friend wrote how Essenen and his fellow Scythian poets wanted a deepening of the political revolution to the social, and came to regard Russian Marxism as coarse. Before his death, Essenen became convinced evil forces had usurped the revolution and the Bolsheviks betrayed Russia's mission. The famed poet Nikolai Kliuev knew both Dr. Badmaev and Grigory Rasputin, and like the latter, had been initiated into a secret school of Christian sexual mysticism with similarities to Tibetan Tantra and Indian Shivaism. "They call me a Rasputin," Kliuev wrote in a 1918 poem. Kliuev's spirituality was deeply rooted in the tradition of the Russian religious dissidents like the Old Believers, the Klisti, and the Skoptsi, who formed a veritable subterranean river among the common people. Kliuev admitted how challenged by a Klist elder to become a Christ, he was introduced to the secret community of Dove Brethren. With the help of various people of secret identity, Kliuev traveled all over Russia, participating in secret rituals and imbibing the occult traditions of the Russian East. In his poems, Kliuev sought to convey the mystic spirit of Eurasia. He was a prophet of Belovodia, the name given by Russian Old Believers to the awaited earthly paradise similar to Shambhala. Kliuev envisioned a radical transformation of Russia that would bring about a classless society where peasant culture would triumph over industrialism, capitalism, and the general mechanization of life. He expressed his concern about the dangers of soulless Western civilization in a 1914 letter to a friend. Quote, "Every day I go into the grove and sit there by a little chapel and the age-old pine tree but an inch to the sky. I think about you. I kiss your eyes and your dear heart, O Mother Wilderness. Paradise of the spirit, how hateful and black seems all that the so-called civilized world, and what I would give you, what Golgotha I would bear, so that America should not encroach upon the blue-feathered dawn, upon the fairy-tale hut." End quote. The Russian philosopher Nicholas Burdyaev articulated the vision shared by pre-revolution Russian thinkers as well as the cultural elite, when he wrote of the end of Western rationalism and the birth of a new era of the spirit which would witness the struggle of Christ and Antichrist. He saw the popularity of mystical and occult doctrines as proof of the approach of this new era, and called for a new knighthood. Quote, "Man is not a unit in the universe, forming part of an unrational machine, but a living member of an organic hierarchy belonging to a real and living whole." End quote. Berdyaev's attacks on Western materialist values only reflected a view widely held by Russian society. Writing in exile in the early 1930s, he observed, quote, "Individualism, the atomization of society, the inordinate acquisitiveness of the world, indefinite overpopulation, and the endlessness of people's needs, the lack of faith, the weakening of the spiritual life, these and other are the causes which have contributed to build up that industrial capitalist system which has changed the face of human life and broken its rhythm with nature." End quote. Journey to Shambhala. Quote, "Nicholas Roerich was a man who brought glory to our Russian people. He is a representative of our civilization and of its culture, one of its pillars." End quote. Mikhail Gorbachev. Nikolai Konstantinovich Roerich had been introduced to the idea of Shambhala while working on the construction of the first Buddhist temple ever to be built in Europe. Personally acquainted with Russia's pre-revolution intelligentsia, Roerich became a highly respected and prolific artist. A student of Madame Blavatsky's works, Roerich believed in the transcendent unity of religions, in the notion that one day the Buddhist, the Muslim, and the Christian world would soon realize their separate dogmas were husks concealing the truth within. Between 1925 and 1928, Roerich undertook 5 remarkable expeditions through Central Asia, focusing on the mysterious region between the Urals and the Himalayas, the area regarded as the heart of Eurasia. The traditions and legends encountered by Roerich in his travels are described in the books Altai Himalaya, Heart of Asia, and Shambhala. In the tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, Shambhala is the hidden land in which the teachings of the Kalachakra, Wheel of Time, Tantric school are kept in their purest forms. Roerich discovered that the Shambhala of Tibetan Buddhism is not too different from the legend of Belavodia, preserved by Russian Christian mystics. An elder of the Old Believer sect confided to Roerich, quote, "In distant lands, beyond the great lakes, beyond the highest mountains, is a sacred place where all truth flourishes. There one may find the supreme knowledge and the future salvation of mankind, and this place is called Belavodia, meaning the white waters." End quote. Nicholas Roerich wrote how, on a visit to the Mongolian capital Ulaanbaatar in the 1920s, he heard soldier revolutionaries singing, quote, "The war of northern Shambhala, let us die in this war, to be reborn again as knights of the ruler of Shambhala." End quote. By northern Shambhala is meant Russia, Eurasia. In his book Heart of Asia, Roerich defined Shambhala not so much as a coming kingdom, but an event, a new epoch for humanity of which Shambhala and Belavodia are timeless symbols. Quote, "You have noted the concept of Shambhala corresponds to the aspiration of our most serious Western scientific research. In their striving, the Eastern disciples of Shambhala and the best minds of the West, which do not fear to look beyond the outworn methods, are uniting." End quote. Roerich never doubted the crucial role Russia would play in bringing together the noblest wisdom of both the East and the West. In Russia, a new synthesis would emerge, and a new day dawn for humanity, neither exclusively Western nor wholly Eastern, but truly Eurasian. In 1940, as the world found itself plunged into war, Roerich discerned the first glimpses of a new era and wrote, quote, "The Russian people have piled together great stones. To the admiration of everyone, they have built no Tower of Babel, but a Russian tower, a Kremlin of sun-bearers with 100 towers. Listen, that is the future, and how radiant it is." End quote. A year later, in 1941, he commented, quote, "The whole world is rushing towards Armageddon. Everyone is confused. Everyone is unsure about the future. But the Russian people have found their course, and with a mighty flood are streaming towards their radiant future." End quote. "You must pay attention to me in order to see me." Humanity's radiant future, like Shambhala, stands at the threshold. An invisible college of men and women in every age and nation have glimpsed it and responded to the impulse. Living in the first years of a new millennium, we are witnessing the unfolding of an ancient plan. Just as there is no day without night, so too there is no authentic new era without its counterfeit. And as the darkness must give way to the new dawn, so our present dark era will pass away in the great light of northern Shambhala. Behind the tangle of present-day events, the ancient battle is being concluded. "In wartime," said the emissary of Atlanticist Winston Churchill, "truth is so precious that she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies." Empowered by the wicked magicians of Atlantis, Western secret societies are in a state of a cold warfare with the order of Eurasia. We await the arrival of the new era of Shambhala, the casting out of the brothers of shadow from the governmental and financial centers of the earth, and the end of the evil karma inherited from the darkness of Atlantis. Alice Bailey, who described Shambhala as the vital center in the planetary consciousness, and related it to the second coming of the Christ, also prophesied Russia's special role in bringing in the true new era. Quote, "Out of Russia will emerge that new and magical religion about which I have so often told you. It will be the product of the great and imminent approach which will take place between humanity and the hierarchy. From these two centers of spiritual force, in which the light which ever shineth in, and from the east will irradiate the west, the whole world will be flooded with the radiance of the sun of righteousness. I am not here referring in connection with Russia to the imposition of any political ideology, but to the appearance of a great and spiritual religion which will justify the crucifixion of a great nation, and will demonstrate itself and will be focused in a great and spiritual light, which will be held aloft by a vital Russian exponent of true religion, that man for whom many Russians have been looking, and who will be the justification of a most ancient prophecy." End quote.